talk about developing a board of trustees, we say developing a healthy board of trustees because that's what you want, not merely a board, but you would like a good board, a healthy board, and one that will function well and help your institution flourish. So that's what we're going to talk about. I should probably say at the beginning, these are very simple, straightforward concepts that I think would be useful in most instances, but every organization is different. And so anytime you do a presentation of this nature, you realize that there is a uniqueness to every organization. You need to understand the nuances to make the appropriate kinds of adjustments. So with that in mind, we'll see where we go with this in developing a healthy board. See if this does it. Oh, there. A healthy board of directors understands, and we might even say needs to understand the organization and is unequivocally committed to the support of its mission and vision. That's an absolute necessity. Those who comprise the board must be absolutely committed to its mission and vision, unequivocal. And in order to do that, they have to understand it. There are lots of people who will say they are committed. They simply mean they're for it, but as they learn more about it, they may have questions about things with which they're uncertain or they disagree, and that could lead to a development of not complete support. So you have to realize that. Therefore, at the beginning, a baseline necessity is understanding and total commitment. You may have to find ways to achieve that, but you need it. There will be a plan for identifying, cultivating, and recruiting new board members. And that's going to be so that those board members understand and are committed to the mission and vision. And the president or the CEO of the organization will have the responsibility to lead that effort. If anyone's going to be responsible for identifying and attracting new board members, that person will. Now, it will be done in coordination with other board members, particularly the chair, but the president has to take the lead. As I mentioned, suggestions can come from anybody. Those other board members can be very useful in helping tell others who would be candidates, giving them information, getting them involved, and qualifying them for board membership. Once you begin the process of thinking about adding new board members, one of the questions you wrestle with is, how do you identify those people? What are you looking for? And come right in, that begins with them becoming informed about your organization. What is it like? What are you accomplishing? What do you stand for? Again, what is the mission and vision, and how clear is that? It should include a willingness to provide financial support, because normally you expect that of a person who's a member of the board. They're going to become invested financially because it takes money to run your organization. However, there can be a qualification, and that's this. If they provide enough else, then the financial obligation could be minimal. But every board member should support the institution financially. If they're not willing to support the institution financially, they should not be on the board. Period. Yes. That one, I think you need to take that seriously, because you say, if they're not willing to give money to it, then they're not that committed. Have you heard the statement, put your money where your mouth is? It's not a bad statement in terms of thinking about board qualifications. Now, that financial support obviously should be proportionate to capacity, and to expect otherwise is unrealistic. But I would say anybody who's on your board not supporting it financially should not be on your board. Don't always think that way. The other way of thinking about how to select board members in terms of criteria is what are called the 3 W's. You may have heard of them and you may not, but the 3 W's are wisdom, work, and wealth. Obviously, we've talked about the wealth or the money part, but you have wisdom, and there are board members who, from their experience, bring a tremendous amount of wisdom that can help an organization tremendously. And then there is the work side. And there are some board members who can give time and effort and will help you accomplish so much more than you could ever do yourself. So usually we say if you get 2 of the 3, you don't need all 3 W's. You only need 2 to have a good board member, but you should have at least 2. If they don't have wealth, then you need wisdom and work. If they do have wealth, then you need wisdom or work. Money alone is never enough. You should never be able to buy your way onto a board. Two of the W's. Now, as you think about it a little further, you say you're gathering this information about a potential candidate for your board, and in gathering, obviously, there's some conversation about the possibilities, and they express interest. So you gather more and more information about them, and that should come from people who know them, from information about their involvement with other organizations, perhaps their service on other boards. I recall being asked to serve on one board, and I won't name the organization, but it was the most thorough board I ever served on in terms of checking your background, learning everything they could about you to be sure that if you became a board member, you would be a very good board member. You would fit, you would get along with the other people on the board, you would love the mission and vision of the institution, you'd be a very constructive part, and they would be happy to have you because they knew you would bring something to the organization. Now, normally, as you go about the process of gathering information about who could serve on your board, who would really be well qualified and bring a lot of strength to your board, one of the things you may want to do along the way is have them visit your organization. Maybe they visit places where you're doing work. Maybe they visit your main campus or headquarters. Then they should also at least attend one board meeting before they're elected, because they should have an opportunity to see how your board functions. If they come and see how the board functions, they may say, I love this, this is great. And they may say, this is a dysfunctional board and I couldn't be here. But if they don't come and have the observation and have the opportunity to meet other other members of the board in that setting, then you don't have a complete set of information for yourself or for the prospective board member. It's simply to say, the more information you have, the more time you spend together, the better you know if it's a good fit. If you're going to marry someone, You don't want to do it 3 days after you meet them. Well, it might work. But the likelihood is it would be good to get a little bit better acquainted before you make that huge step. And the same with board membership. Another thing that you probably want to think about in terms of board membership is the kind of competence or expertise that you may need to help your organization and your board function well. And not all boards think about this, but when you think of the work of an organization, you realize finance is a big part of it. Communication, marketing may be a significant part of it. Investments could be, education could be, legal matters almost always are at some point. Sometimes knowledge of real estate. It depends on the kind of organization you have, but typically the kind of organization will dictate areas in which expertise is needed. And you say, well, we have people who know these things in the organization, and you do. And you have outside experts you can go to. However, to have someone on the board who has a measure of expertise in the most important areas is a tremendous asset. I happen to have been involved with an institution on a board where there were a number of lawyers. And I was educated by being around those lawyers for a few years. Observing how they made you think and process information, observing how they kept the organization out of trouble, and when it did have trouble, how they worked to solve that with minimum pain to the institution. So, and you can think about this would be true in so many different areas. I have never been on a board where we did not appreciate the expertise of people in areas that were a benefit to the operation of the institution. In fact, I would say any organization that isn't looking for that to get a good balance is making a big mistake. So you want a total composition of your board to put you in a position to have what I would call a competent review of all areas of the institution and control. We say typically, what's the function of a board? It's review and control, isn't it? So if they don't have the expertise to really understand and review those details, they can't do it effectively and they cannot exercise appropriate control over the organization. Now, you have to think about how people are not only identified and recruited to the board, the criteria for being sure they're a good fit, but what about the election of those board members? Well, if another organization elects the members of the board, I can tell you that creates a big challenge. Most organizations or institutions elect their own board members. But sometimes you are a subsidiary of another organization. And in that case, either the organization will review all nominees before they're elected and then approve them after they're elected, or in some instances, they elect them for you. For example, there are denominations that actually elect the board members for various ministries or organizations that are subsidiaries. Some denominations elect the trustees of theological schools and colleges, as well as of their missions and Christian education ministries and the like. And when that happens and you have another group electing your trustees, you've got to be prepared. So if you're not prepared and you don't do your homework, they may elect people who are not good. Not because they're bad people, but they're not suited to do the work of your board. And they're not a good fit, and it'll create some issues. So in that case, if that should happen, what you want to do is say, we need to have some kind of liaison with the electing organization. Maybe it's the president, maybe it's the board chair and the president, but there needs to be some kind of conversation with that controlling body that does the electing to say, we simply want to talk to you about what we're doing. We know you want us to thrive and flourish, and we want to be as beneficial to you as possible. To that end, we need the best board we can get. And what we would like to do is be able to suggest to you people who would be good for our board. We like to advance nominees to you. And you may say, if you have suggestions, we'd love to be able to discuss them so that we can come to some agreement before nominations are formalized and sent to the denomination or controlling body for election. If you can do that, you can keep yourself out of a lot of trouble. Well, once you've gone through this process of deciding what kind of trustees you need, what kind of board members you need, developing the criteria for their selection, beginning to identify them, get them involved with your institution, have an appropriate process for their nomination and election, they become board members, and then you have to do something with them. You have to be sure they really help you. That means the next step is some type of orientation. That is, they know a lot about you already, but they may not know as much as you think. And you want to be sure they have a comprehensive overview of the institution. You want to be sure they understand all the facets of your organization and what you're doing. And so as you take steps to do that, you say, we're going to give them an overview that will let them have a basic working knowledge of this organization. Because if they don't really know how we operate, they'll misunderstand some things and they won't be as big a help to us as we need them to be. I think at this point, it's not only important to do that, but also to reassert the expectations you have of them. So normally, if you're talking to someone about joining your board, you not only talk about what your organization is doing and why it's important to be a part of it, but you talk to them about what they're expected to do. And once they join the board and they're part of this orientation, now's the time to give a reminder. Here's what we're expecting you to do. We're so glad you're a part of this, but now we need you to do these things. Say that orientation should probably occur as soon as possible after the person is elected, which normally would be the next meeting of the board. So when the board meets again in conjunction with that meeting, maybe just prior. Sometimes organizations do it early on the same day or the day prior. There's an orientation, and then the person is ready to attend the board meeting. Then who should do this orientation? That's another question. If you're going to do it, who would conduct it? Well, I would say the president, but others would be included possibly as well. You might have the chair, for example, give a welcome and a reminder of the mission and vision. And they're going to have to work with the person who's the chair, and that person is in a position of authority in the board, so they need to be with him and hear him as soon as possible in regard to that. You might have key personnel on the staff. You might have the person who's over finance or the person who's over fundraising or whatever, those key people would make very brief presentations and say, here's where they are and what's happening, and here's how you can understand this. You would also expect that a policy manual would be made available to all new trustees or board members. And as they become directors and receive their policy manuals, what you'd like to do is give them an idea of how this policy manual works, why it's important, how they can use it. Because the last thing you want is for them to take the policy manual, look at it a little bit, and go put it somewhere and never refer to it again. There are times when you need to know those policies. And a board member who's going to be a good functioning board member needs to know what's in the policy manual or manuals. They will be expected to have that knowledge at some board meetings. And then finally, as part of the orientation, you want to give them some sense of what their responsibilities are, maybe committee assignments, maybe other things. And what all of this does is they come in and they say, you really take this seriously. And I can see that you know what you're expecting out of this organization, and you know what you expect out of me and out of the whole board. And they see this as something important then. Now, once you do the orientation, it's very easy to be satisfied that you've done everything you're supposed to do. I mean, after all, you've identified them, you've recruited them, they've been nominated, elected, you've given them an orientation. Go to work. And that's what you expect. However, it doesn't always happen quite so smoothly. So people come to the first board meeting. Sometimes they feel perfectly comfortable. Other times, there's certain things that they don't understand quite as well as they like, or that they're a little uncertain about, or perhaps even uncomfortable about. So after the first board meeting, there should always be a follow-up, typically by the president. And he should contact that board member personally. He may visit with them briefly in person to person after the board meeting before they leave. But if not, he should call them in the next day or so. And when he calls, ask how they like the meeting, if they have any questions about it. He might even ask them, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Do you think this is going well? And what you're doing is you're letting that board member know they're important, you're taking them seriously, and you expect them to plug in and know what's going on and be a working part of it. And if there's any way in which they feel they need help, you're going to give it to them. You'll be supportive so they can be valuable working board members. Sometimes it just takes a little encouragement. My experience has been new board members need frequent contact, at least for the first year, regular contact after that. You'll find if you give them attention, they will give their work attention. So, simply underscoring the need for continuing education and cultivation. And I underscore the cultivation part as much as the education. You're always going to have a need to educate your board so they can do a better job. But there is an immense amount of work that needs to be done on cultivation, and I'll talk about that a little later on at greater length. I'd say that one of the things you'll find helpful to do, if you don't think about it, is connect the new members of the board to the staff, especially key members of the staff, so that they can build good relationships and eventually trust. Now, let's say a board member has an assignment in finance. You would say, okay, he'll know the chief financial officer, and he'll know the members of the board on the finance committee. And you would expect that. And they begin to work together. But You might also want to introduce that person to a couple of the other key staff. They may have heard them at orientation, but you can help them meet together and get better acquainted and build a relationship where they feel comfortable working with each other and talking to each other. If a question comes up, they can call. So that's very helpful to do. The thing you're really working for here is to make everyone feel comfortable in all the working relationships and to know that you want them to have whatever they need to be able to do a good job. And that their function as a board is to help the organization do a good job. So it becomes very positive, very constructive, very supportive, gathering information, doing whatever you need to do to help people do good jobs. And as you work to build good relationships and people learn how you operate, what's expected, what you discover is it gets better and better. And you develop a high level of trust because people know what they can count on. And if you have good, strong relationships and high trust, you'll have a good organization. The next thing you have to think about is how about board reports? That's something important and perhaps doesn't always get the attention it should. Seems to me that the board needs regular reports that are brief but provide important, necessary information. And I'm underscoring regular, brief, important, and necessary. Those 4 words. Talk about them a little more. I have been involved in some boards where you are inundated with a huge amount of material, some of which is not coordinated well. So you just get this mass of material coming to you, and you don't see how in the world to put it all together. And what a typical board member will do, especially if they're busy people, is they will begin to just do that. They just push all that kind of information away. In fact, they may even stack it up, and just before the board meeting, they'll look through it, see if anything looks important they need to know for the board meeting, especially any action items that are there. So you avoid sending huge amounts of material. And when you do send reports, they should be in some sort of standard format so they know what they're looking for, and it's easy for them to understand and figure out what's there. If I know there's a form, I know exactly what to look for on that form. The regular flow of pertinent information helps keep a board engaged. My experience has been, depending on the size of the board, the amount of activity, and the information the board needs to process, they should have a report between once a month and once a quarter. Smaller organizations, once a quarter is fine. But they should have regular reports. And those reports should hit key items that everyone knows are important and they're expected to keep up with. Every report should be reviewed by the president or CEO before it is distributed. Not to do so is a major mistake. Before any report goes out, you want to look at it and be sure you like the way it looks. If you don't like the way it looks, you need to talk to the person who did that report and discuss how you can improve it and get it up to the standard. This doesn't relate to the board itself, but I would say any major public communication in addition to board communications, any major public communication should be reviewed by the CEO or president. In some ways, you have to be a problem shooter or troubleshooter as far as the kind of information that goes out. Or if there is a misstep and something is said that is seriously at error or problematic, you have a lot of work to do to clean it up. And it's better to avoid it in the first place. The next thing I would be concerned to do is involve the board in the strategic planning process, and then later in regular reviews of the plan. Those might be annual reviews or biannual. Typically, you're going to have reviews in part at board meetings as you get updates on progress. And that progress report should be tied to the strategic plan. So we say you get a plan, the board's involved in making the plan so they can be sure as part of their responsibility that the plan fits the mission and vision, everything's falling into place, you have good alignment, it looks really nice, it's supposed to work as nicely, and then you keep everybody posted on the way it's going. And if there's a problem, it'll begin to show up fairly quickly. Another thing I would do is provide some kind of opportunity for professional development of the board. Typically, we expect the board to come and serve, and we give them the responsibilities and we provide all kinds of information, but we don't often go outside to professionals to help our board grow and be better at what they do. There are organizations that can help boards improve governance. There are organizations that can help boards improve with their fundraising. There are boards, there are outside resources or consultants that can help boards with planning, things like that. And so you look for ways periodically to help the board gain additional information and to develop so that they will be more informed, better board members. And one of the things you'll do is you will help the board member realize how much you value their contribution or participation. I mean, if you're going to spend money and time to help them get better, what does that say? What they're doing is very important to your future. What about the president's role in all of this? He has a key role in maintaining board health. One of the first things I would say is the president should develop close ties to all board members. He ought to spend time socially as well as time that is related specifically to board responsibilities. They're not the same. They're really not the same. So you need to cultivate your board by calling and visiting and seeing what's happening, talk about their family, talk about their work, call them on their birthdays, do things like that that show you care. And then call periodically or visit with them and let them know what's going on or ask for their help with a particular issue. And what you're doing is you're building a much better relationship. And they're much more tied in and feel a part as you do something like that. If, for some reason, there is not a good working relationship with a member of the board, and once in a while you have a board member who begins to disagree, he disagrees with decisions, he may not like the way the president is leading the organization, he may have other problems, and they'll be manifested. Now, if you're doing all of the cultivation you should do, you'll pick that up early on and perhaps have a way to resolve it. But if not, you have a board member who's not a good fit. And the smartest thing you can do at that point is to discuss the matter with the chair. And if there's anyone on the board who's a close friend, maybe even talk to them about it. But for sure, you discuss that with the chair. You talk about where you are and if there's a way to resolve the difficulty, and if not, that board member needs to be invited to step away. If you have terms and re-elections, that can take care of it. If not, the person needs to be invited to step away. And then, if you do that, you need to be very careful or you will permanently alienate that person. The easiest way to do it is to have a conversation and say, I know there's some things that aren't going as well as they should, and you're not happy about this, and I wish we could get it worked out. Would you like to talk about this some more and see what we can do? If not, you just may not be comfortable continuing to work in this situation, and we don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position. And you try to find a way to make it easier for them to step away. And the president's got to do that. Don't expect somebody else to do it for you. He should also plan and organize social gatherings for the board and for spouses that lead to strong social bonding. Strong social bonding, building relationships, is an essential point of developing a healthy board. This is not a minor thing. I was fortunate to have a wife who was extremely good at doing all this. She worked not only with board members, but with their spouses, worked to do things that would give opportunities to be together and have wonderful experiences. Sometimes you even have a retreat. And part of the retreat is simply fun, just being together, enjoying one another. It helps tremendously. You have to nurture a close working relationship with the chair. That means regular contact, usually at least every week. If nothing more, then call and say hello and how are things doing and whatever. It can be minimal. But there needs to be a way of keeping the board chair informed. And that relationship should be like this as much as possible. Most of us don't think that way, but that's what we should be working for. And the more you get that chairman aligned with you, the better it's going to make your work. So the chair needs to be as informed and supportive of you as possible, and you have to work to build a relationship. If there's ever a problem, and typically there are lots of them, if there's ever a problem, something's not going right, you need to tell the chair immediately. If the chair hears from somebody else, from some other source, before he hears from you, you have made a major mistake. So you've got to be sure that you have that kind of close working relationship with the chair, that you're building trust. If there's ever a problem, he's going to know about it as quickly as anybody else. I'll never forget one of the worst experiences I ever had in my life was getting a call about 6 o'clock one morning. I was called and told that I would be getting a telephone call from the New York Times very quickly because a graduate of our institution had just shot and killed a person at an abortion clinic. And I knew it was going to be a horrible day. For one, it was something none of us would have thought possible from a graduate. Of course, we were against abortion, but you don't kill a person to stop abortions. So it was a horrible shock. And then I knew all the news media in the country were going to be calling. So it's 6 o'clock in the morning. I called the chairman of the board right then. And I said, I just had a call. This is what's happened. And I know here's what's coming. And here's what I think I need to be prepared to say, but tell me what you think in terms of the way we handle it. And so there's several things we did. One, we decided as a standard, the institution has one voice and one voice only. So I would be the voice. We agreed on what would be said. I told everybody else in the whole institution, I said, if anybody calls you about this, don't say anything. You have them talk to me. Because if you say something and it isn't right, we got a conflict, it's going to make this worse. It only takes one problem like this to educate you forever. You never forget it. So all these things sound nice until you bump into things that really challenge the relationships in the board, the strength of the board, the commitment of the board, and can really rock the institution if you don't handle it well. But here's the other side of it. When you do all of these things as you should do them and the pieces fall into place, when there are problems and you handle them well, you come out stronger on the other side. People have a better opinion of you. Trust rises. The board has greater confidence in the way you're going to handle difficulties and wanting to help you move ahead and avoid any other ones. So all of this can work to your advantage if it's done right. So never conceal bad news of any type. Good communications, good relationships, good performance, they all build trust. And that's the bedrock of a healthy board. Ultimately, if the board knows the leadership of the institution understands what they have to do and they're competent to do it and they're following through on a regular basis, having good performance, they're going to have confidence and be supportive. And they'll be even that much more desirous of fulfilling their role responsibly. The other thing you want to think about is, with the chair, arrange for periodic board reviews of presidential performance. That way, there is an anonymous way. You don't have, names don't have to be revealed or anything, but you can check all the things that are important in terms of the president's performance. And then those are compiled, and someone, maybe the board chair, maybe someone else on the board, would be responsible to meet with the president and review that and say, here's what we see, here are areas where you're just doing great, here are some areas where there probably could be some improvement. What do you think we could do to help you with this so that it'll be even better? So it becomes a constructive kind of thing. The other thing I would do is also arrange for periodic board reviews. You don't want to do these things every year. But maybe every 3 years you do a board review. And there are reviews that are out there. You can use forms or you can do your own. And it's amazing. You do every board member fills it out, and then you compile that and then let the board see where everything is. I happened to be on a board once where there was a president who thought he was probably the best thing that had ever happened to the Christian world apart from the Lord Jesus. And then we had a board review. And the board review gave him the worst marks I've ever seen on a review in my life. And I had to have a part in explaining that to him. And it was a shock. Then with that sort of thing, you say, you see yourself one way, people see you a different way. You have a lot of gifts. How can we help you? Because if we can't help you do better, this isn't going to work well. That's tough when you're in that kind of situation. Usually it's more the other way. You're doing a good job. How can we help you do a better job?